Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of these little guys right here. These are the CJRB Feldspar pocket knives in the 3-inch and 3.5-inch size. First off, though, in name of full disclosure, these guys were sent to me directly by Artisan Cutlery, who is the parent company of CJRB. In fact, they were sending along another knife, the Artisan Centauri here, and I was interested, and they said, hey, Nick, do you want to check out the Feldspars too while we're at it? I said, sure, why not, right? But nonetheless, I sent them my disclaimer. They've heard everything. And talk about the good, the great, the bad, the ugly. Might be a gem, might be junk. They did still send them along. But we do have to assume, though, that these are the very best quality controlled Feldspars ever. And I'm doing my best not to let that affect the nature of my review. Next thing, size comparison. This is not a terribly large set of knives here. I'll put them both together so you can kind of get a sense of both of them here. Here they are against the Spyderco Knives PM2 right there. And so what we can see here is that in terms of sharpened length, the big Feldspar is actually a little bit bigger than the PM2, even if the blade lengths are equivalent. Here they are against the Spyderco Delica. And the little one actually beats the Delica in terms of sharpened length as well. That's what you get when you don't have the Choil, right? And then here it is against the Dario Rat number 2. And then finally against another knife that I think merits a very strong comparison, and that is the CJRB Centros, which is a very, very nice little knife. A little bit bigger than both of these guys, but yeah, there we go. And then finally, a quick note on this guy. These guys are designed by an in-house designer over at Artisan Cutlery. Although they look a little bit like the Centros, they are from a different person entirely. So, yeah, do keep that in mind. Then finally, there are two sizes here, the 3-inch and 3.5, but I'm going to treat them effectively as equivalent during the review here. And at the end, talk about the advantages and disadvantages of both. So let's go on ahead and jump into the good, the great, and the bad, and the ugly of the CJRB, not Artisan, kind of Artisan, Feldspars here. So, on the good side, to start with, honestly, I kind of appreciate a good thumb stud knife. At this point in time, the world is so saturated with flipping knives, especially in that $40 price point out of China. There are a lot of flippers these days. And so, at some level, seeing a really nice bearing action with a thumb stud, that's kind of nice. It's kind of refreshing. It's a little different. It's funny that we're in a place now where thumb studs feel refreshing and different, but it's kind of where we're at. So I appreciate very much that they didn't just throw an unnecessary flipper tab on both of these guys. That's nice. Next thing, I have to say, I appreciate the big-small pairing thing that Artisan keeps doing. It's a joy whenever I see a nice design that's being presented at both sides, because that makes it very easy for people who, for instance, have a law that prevents them from carrying something over 3 inches, although this is just over 3 inches, depending on how you want to measure it. If the cop doesn't like you, it's 3 inches. And this guy is, again, just over 3.5, depending on how you want to measure it. But still, it's nice to see these two different size choices for people who have two different size desires, although they're not exactly equivalent in ways we'll talk about later. Next thing, I also like the fact that you got some options in terms of coloration. I've seen black, blue, brown, and then there's Natural G10 and or Jade G10. Yeah, Jade's a gem. This is puke. Anyways, I digress. You got a bunch of different options going on there, which I do very much appreciate. Next thing, these guys have contoured G10 handles. What I mean by that is that the G10 handles are contoured. I know, shockingly opaque until I explained it there. But nonetheless, if we look at these guys, we can see that there is a rounding, a contouring going on here, as opposed to on a knife like, for instance, the Centros here, which has flat handles. This actually does make this a little nicer in the hand, and frankly, it makes it very attractive. These knives end up looking a little prettier than the Centros just because of that contouring, as well as the fact that the liners are nested. What I mean by that is that on the Centros here, you can see the liners are visible from the top there, whereas on this guy, the liners are actually only inside of there. Nested liners are getting to be relatively common, but it is something that's nice to see, and it kind of classes the place up a little bit, which I appreciate. Next thing, these have very easy lock bar access. You've got this nice cutout on this side, and then the lock bar is right here, so it's very easy to pull this guy in and pop these guys. That's just beautiful. Yet it's absolutely not going to come unlocked in your hand. That's good too. Next thing, I love the pivot collars on these. Again, this is a little tiny extra mile thing, but it looks good. Putting this little tiny, looks to be maybe a brass pivot collar around there. Look, it's just attractive. Like, flat out, it adds a little something. And especially when the bulk of knives out there are just using a random screw, that definitely adds. It's nice. I appreciate it. Next thing, blades on these guys. Overall, we can see here D2 steel on both of these guys, and D2 is one of those steels that is good to go. It's fine. I mean, it works absolutely fine for everyday life, and I appreciate very much that they're using it, and also you see that they've got reasonably thin edges here. The bigger one much more so than the small one, which is a little bit thicker behind the edge than I'd maybe like to see, but it's also a shorter blade, so, I'm sorry, a shorter, well, less tall blade, if you will. So I can see that. And both of them have a very good sharpening choil that is completely and totally, good to go for sharpening choil needs. That's good. Next thing, these have a very nice action. I'll go ahead and I'll deploy this one without any wrist at all. Absolutely fires open, no question. And I'll do the little one as well. Fire is open, zero question. That is absolutely a beautiful thing. And so I appreciate that you have a good action both on the close and on the open. These nice big blades in here, these guys have got a very nice action. Then next thing, I do appreciate the design here. It is attractive. It's relatively minimalist. Although it's a little reminiscent of the Centros, it's a pretty damn good design. I appreciate that very much, and I think the knife looks actually pretty attractive for it. I'm not necessarily convinced by having this cut out for the clip on the other side there, but 10% of the population is going to love it, so okay, I guess. But nonetheless, it's attractive, and it's got a little bit, it's a little differentiated from the flood of some of the stuff that Artisan has put out in the past, or CJRB's put out in the past. Like, what is it, the Tiger? There were a couple of other ones that were just like, eh. And this feels like it's got a little design to it. So I appreciate that very much, and to me, all that is the good. It's got an attractive and relatively minimal design, a very nice action, nice blades. I do love the pivot collar on this guy. The lock bar access is good to go. With nested line is good contouring. Some options. These big, small pairings are always nice, and I always do appreciate a thumb stud knife in this day and age. Great side, $35. Now, that's great. I mean, seriously. For a long time, it was the case, even some of my standards, like the Rat 2 and Os 8 steel, that's $35, that we're getting this kind of thing with these nested contoured liners, nested scales, contoured liners, D2 blade, reasonable grinds, nice action, really nice action. $35, that's good. That's real good. This is a good freaking price tag. It's $35 for the big, it's $32 for the small, but yes, just yes. That is the kind of value that these kinds of companies, especially ones with relatively little brand net recognition still at this point, need to be bringing to the table in order to succeed. The micro brand sort of world needs to be aggressive in their pricing, and this is aggressive, and I appreciate that very much. So to me, at least, what's great here is the pricing. On the bad side, this definitely needed a little bit of love to have a really, really great action. A little bit of gunk in there from the factory, not the end of the world, and for $35, okay, not a huge deal. Next thing, neither of them is exactly scented. Again, $35, not a big deal. Next thing, this guy has a grind that is not quite as nice as the Centros. The Centros guy, again, still CJRB, but actually had a slightly thinner grind, and you can tell that especially at the tip there. The big one's much closer to parity with it, but it definitely has a thicker grind than the Centros there, and that's not something I'm in love with generally. Next thing, these are thick knives. I don't necessarily mean in terms of blade length, although they are a little bit thick. Again, I like slices, but these guys definitely are, they're thick in the pocket. We put this guy up next to the Delica. We can see here that at its thickest point here, yeah, that's pretty substantially thicker. Here it is against the PM2, which is another thick knife. We can see this is actually thicker than the PM2. This is not ideal, and even the thin one is about PM2 thickness. Maybe a little less if you don't count the pivot. But still, these are definitely chubby little beasts here. They're also a little bit on the heavier side. They're not so bad. This guy comes in around 3 inches here in blade, and we're at 2.7. It's actually not so bad. 2.79 ounces, a little under an ounce an inch. This guy's coming in at 4.19 ounces for the 3.5 or so inch blade. That's not something like I said, it's a little heavy, but not the end of any worlds particularly. Next thing, ergonomically speaking, they're good in the hand. Well, this guy is. The big one is good in the hand, but there's this fair amount of gap right here between the cutting edge and your hand, and you can kind of choke up. Gotta use this guy as a finger choil, and then it works great. But if you're back here, it feels like you're a good ways away from the cutting surface. Not the end of the world, but it's definitely something that I don't prefer, and I really hope that, this should be a finger choil, because you kind of want it to be, at least for a lot of cutting. And actually, that brings me to the final point, which is that the finger choil on these guys is a little bit small if it's meant to be that at all. On the small one especially, I have relatively small hands, and thus relatively small fingers, and this is not really enough space here. And so if they're trying to make this a finger choil, they should expand it out a little bit. And same thing on this guy. Just give me a couple of more millimeters here, and we would be a little bit safer in that way. So at least to me, wow, it's a little bit small in the choil there. And so to me, all of that is the bad, is that the finger choil is a little small. You're a little bit far away from the edge grip in this guy, in this grip here. It's a little bit on the thick side, a little bit on the heavy side. The grind isn't as nice as the Centros. Neither of them's quite scented, but 35 bucks, and it needed a little love to have a good action. On the ugly front, unfortunately, on the small one, the clip on this guy is just not good. I mean, you can see actually the clip is the same thing, but the problem is the exact same clip on two differently sized knives is not necessarily the exact same thing. And on the small one, the clip completely dominates the lock side of this. In your hand, you are just digging this clip right into your hand the entire time. On the big one, actually, there's a lot more handle to it. So the clip kind of disappears a little bit, and it fits a little bit better in my hand, especially once I choke up a little bit, then the clip seems to more or less disappear. But on the small one, it's just all clip, and it's all corners, and it's all ugly. I don't care for this clip. Well, actually, no, the clip is fine, but I don't care for this clip on this knife. I think they could have actually done a lot better using a clip like this guy that actually stays a little bit lower, and although you'd have a much less deep carry, which, you know, is a downside, but you would at least have a lot less sticking up in your hand there. I think that would have been a more comfortable solution. And putting the exact same clip on both of these knives was not a great approach. So, to me at least, that's what's ugly here, is that the clip on the small one makes this guy ergonomically really not good. Coupled with that small choil, whereas on the big one, it's not a problem. So the ugly is kind of small specific, but it is definitely ugly. Final conclusion, this is actually, I mean, especially the big one, this is a good knife from Artisan. This is actually a great knife. I mean, because you got a choice of your sizes there, you got a choice of colors, good contouring, nested liners, a good pivot collar, a nice blade action, and a price that's really hard to object to. I mean, 35 bucks. A lot of people are going to be like, oh my God, it's 35 bucks. Why are you nitpicking? That's what I do. But still, it stands up well to scrutiny for 35 bucks. I can't argue with it there. It's true that it needed some maintenance to run well. True that they're not quite scented. It's also true that the grind's aren't perfect. The finger choil's small, little thick, and honestly, the clip on the small one, it's kind of a loss. And that kind of brings me to the oddity here, is we've got two sizes of the same knife, but the small one, because of this clip issue, just isn't as nice. I love the big guy here. This is a really nice knife over here. The small one, not so much. With a thinner grind and a better clip, this small one could definitely be a gem, 100%. But as now, the small is a big step down from the big, and I don't just mean that in terms of size. This top guy here, this is a gem. At 35 bucks, this is an absolutely great, solid little knife here. I like it very, very much. The small one is absolutely not a gem. Until they fix that clip issue, maybe it's ergonomic, maybe your hand's going to be better than mine, but it sure isn't interesting to me. But this is a gem. It's a good cutting tool that has a fine design, a very nice action, and they're coming in at a price that's hard to object to. And sure, there were getting to be a lot of good choices around 35 bucks. This is one of many options. I mean, there are lots and lots of knives coming out of there from small brands from China, even from CJRB. There's the Centros here, which is another really great choice. It's a little bit longer, and it goes over that 3.5-inch line, which is going to make it illegal in some places. But the fact is, this is a really nice piece, too. And actually, I kind of like the Centros a little bit more. I think ergonomically, it's a little bit nicer. I would probably choose this one over the Feldspar at the moment, although I can acknowledge the Feldspar to be maybe a little bit more attractive in the handle. If they married these two, the contoured handle on the Centros body, oh, yeah, that could be attractive. But the fact is that the Feldspar here is excellent. This big one here is an absolutely great knife. And if you're loving the style, and if you're loving the overall approach to things, then I think you could find that the Feldspar rocks. Because it's a mineral. Okay. Anyways, there you go. Hope you were hope you found this interesting, that you didn't enjoy, or that you enjoyed my sparring with these two knives during the review process, and that you have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. That you felt this review was good. Okay, I should stop now. Bye now.